Hi, good morning, Rosa. My name is Francis Tanseco. I'm sure we know each other. I'm just introducing myself just for the sake of our viewers. This audience is intended for the Philippines, but of course, I'm sure there will be international audience as well, as there's a lot of Filipinos all over the world. And so, just a little introduction about myself. I used to be a nurse in the UK for almost 15 years, and also doubles with doing paintings and exhibitions. And I did a musical about Imelda Marcos of the Philippines titled A Mother's Soul. And I pretty much do a lot of artsy stuff on the side. So I'm gonna ask you first by introducing yourself and telling us where you're from and what you do, and how we get to know each other, sort of stuff.
Okay, so my name is Rosa Montague. I was born in Newcastle upon Tyne, which is in the north of England in the UK. You and I connected on Facebook some years ago now.
Yes.
And it's always been a lovely connection. Always happy to talk to you, Francis. These days, I am a psychic tarot reader, clairvoyant, spiritual healer. I would probably put in there planetary healer as well. I think those of us who are aware and awake to the current situation in the world today range from those who want to sit on top of Mount Shasta and meditate to those who are really politically active and think spirituality is not the way to solve the problem, and the rest of us fall somewhere in between. That's probably you and I, somewhere in between. My grandma used to take me to Spiritualist Church when I was 16 because I was fascinated by the whole thing. When I was a little girl, she would show me photographs, family photographs, and she would point out spirit people in them. So I always wanted to know more.
Wow.
Loved getting a message when I went to church. And at 16, they were telling me that I had the star of healing on my forehead and I should be sitting in a developing circle to learn to use my clairvoyant abilities. But, at that age, I wasn't ready to sit in church 5 nights a week. So I've kind of dipped in and out of it. But every few years, something will happen that seems to trigger a quantum leap. So I moved to the countryside, just outside the city of Durham. And I had the woods behind my house. And I connected with nature in a way I never had before. So I bought a book called The Elements of Natural Magic by Marion Green. And that just opened up a whole new world. And then I became single with 4 children. So I started to study with the Open University, and I studied psychology and world religions. At this time, I was working in women's hostels and also on alcohol and substance rehab units. And I did, and by this time I was using tarot cards and stuff, all kinds of things like that, just dabbling with different tools of divination. And then a friend of mine asked me to do a past life regression with her to help her qualify as a hypnotherapist. And that just seemed to open all kinds of doors and that I wasn't even aware were there. So, information started flooding in. And I had to learn how to channel and learn where the on-off switch was and how to protect myself from psychic attacks, because these things do happen. And it went steadily from there. So I graduated in sociology when I was 43. And then I did 4 years of voluntary work. And on one of their big, they used to have a carnival day every year in this particular area I was working with. And they asked me to read the cards, do readings for free, to help raise money for the charity. And by the end of the day, I realized that I could do it. I actually could read for strangers. So that's when I started working professionally, which was maybe about 2002. And I've been doing it ever since, whilst still doing my own research into lots of things. I went to Africa to volunteer in an orphanage for 6 months. I traveled to India just for 6 weeks to research trafficking in women and children. So I still like getting involved in those kind of things and community work, that sort of thing. But I love my work. I love what I do, and that actually pays me. That's my only paid income.
You've been doing that now for coming to 20 years. That's correct.
Professionally, yeah. Before that, I
Professionally.
only used to do it for family and friends.
Right. And you have traveled the world, and you seem to have traveled to places that are highly energetic. If it now, at least, they have proven that there's so highly spiritual, highly energetic in terms of what they have left us in archaeology, in archaeology and all that. There must be
Yeah.
a reason for those.
Probably, it's strange that after I graduated, would you believe I actually registered to do a PhD and an MA at the same time because I thought I was Superwoman.
Yes.
I didn't make either of those qualifications, but the MA was Gender, Culture and Development with Sunderland University, and within 6 months I had the opportunity for funding to take me to India to research trafficking in women and children. And my lecturer introduced me to the Guild of Service, and that was founded by a lady called Dr. Mohini Giri. And she had been the official hostess of the president because she was his son's wife. And she founded the first widows' home in India to try to prevent women from throwing themselves on their husband's funeral pyres. By the time I got there, she had opened 8 across India, but she always had, because women have 2 choices, they either turn to prostitution or they kill themselves. And those that turned to prostitution inevitably ended up with children. Those children would be running the streets. So by that time, she also had 6 homes open for street children. And there's a wonderful story in her book called, about how her and her friend smuggled a little girl out of a brothel under their saris and, ran down the street with pimps banging on the roof of the car. So I was taken straight to the source of the information, given a safe place to stay where I could just explore that information. It gave me a great understanding on a global scale of what I'd only been aware of in my own little community. Africa was the same. So, sorry to ramble on a bit here, but in 2009, there was a guy called Sean Jason from Canada who started a group called Light Workers of the World on Facebook, and within 1 month, he had 5,000 members in 17 different countries.
Mm-hmm.
So I got involved in that. And that split off into groups, each country, cities in various countries. But Light Workers UK, I met a guy from Africa who was also on a website called Tesson for Humanities, which was trying to fund humanitarian projects around the world. And this guy sent me a friend request. And when I responded, I asked him what he did, and I told him I'd always wanted to do voluntary overseas work, and he said, come and volunteer for me. So it was a series of connections. And he's somebody who was frequently invited to the chief's palace for dinner. The chief had given him 52 plots of land to build a new house on. And I watched as volunteers from around the world who had been there built this house from scratch because social services were threatening to take the children away from them because they're overcrowded. Mm-hmm. So it's been interesting, but it's as though when I really decide I want to do something, everything's there that I need.
Right. Did this experience help you in terms of understanding your card, or not, if you do tarot reading, or if you do energy reading, or sort of all those stuff?
I think everywhere I've been, you learn how different people work. So you can go and take as many qualifications as you like in different kinds of healing, and they will all teach you something. But you meet other people and you'll see their techniques. So the guy who founded the orphanage, his uncle was one of the most sought after healers in Ghana.
Wow.
And I was introduced to him. That was an amazing experience because they work with the tiny seashells that used to be the currency in Ghana before money was introduced. Not so very long ago, actually.
That even is an
And
interesting information.
yeah, he did readings with those, but he would take a blank piece of paper and, you know, write a number on it with his, and I could actually see it. So it was bizarre. So he was really fascinated with my tarot cards, and I with his shells. And I actually came down with a fever, and I refused to go to the local hospital. So they brought him to me, and he made a potion, and he said, the fever will be gone by tomorrow. You will be weak for 2 days. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow. What
So,
happened? What happened with that incident of you having a fever and then?
well, that was odd. They took me to see, I wanted to visit this healer in a neighboring village. And this healer was working from behind a curtain. So all you could do was hear his voice, which they said was magic. And he demanded that I recite the Lord's Prayer, which didn't please me at all.
Why is that?
Excuse me. I got back from there and I came down with a fever. Interestingly enough, had I not had that fever, I would have been going with everybody else to Cape Coast to visit a castle where slaves used to be kept in the dungeon. And the young European volunteers came back absolutely distraught by the stories they heard and obviously the energy they were picking up. They were really, really upset. So I was spared that. My healer friend, the guy's uncle, he got annoyed when I refused to be his fourth wife. So that association ended, unfortunately. But
So while you were telling me your story about having a fever and going through all this process, uh, something sort of a download thought or information gets into my head, and it seems to tell me that you have, it seems to tell me that you have been through an initiation. Through an initiation.
Do you think?
It seems like you have been initiated into something. They have cleared your energy space or your energy, whatever, chakra, whatever you want to call that, by having that fever. And then they open it up so that you could meet this person who would have given you something to cleanse. After you've been cleansed, to have been giving you something, some sort of information to help you out with what you do.
Yes, I would agree with you. That would make perfect sense.
It's weird because it's so weird because I would have not thought about this kind of thing. It's not going to be my own personal sort of thought. I felt like this in conversation is weird as it is, weird enough as it is. But having this kind of thought, like, okay, where did that come from? Why did I was able to sort of put it that way, and who's giving me that thought? But it's sort of spontaneous. And then
this is how I teach people to use their clairvoyant abilities. I will say to people, sit there and ask your questions. So you might ask a question like, what kind of day will I have tomorrow? And the answer you might hear, teapots and bananas. Accept it. Don't try to make sense of it, just accept it. Because once you start to try to analyze it, you break that connection. It stops the flow of information. So, and for all you know, somebody might give you a bag of bananas tomorrow. So you don't have to look for it making sense. So thank you for that, because that ties in. The first few weeks I was at the orphanage, I used to go home and cry every night. I was on emotional overload, but I was also I started getting flashbacks to previous lives I'd had in Africa, where I had a father who was in a position of responsibility and didn't always do good things, very colonial, and I was powerless to stop it. So yes, I think I did have stuff to clear from there.
Right. So you did mention that you've been through or a discovery of some sort in terms of human trafficking, and I have been reading, for many years now, what's going on with it, and with the numbers of missing people in America, children especially, up to 500,000 every year, and all over the world between 1 to 2 million every year. And not even 50% or not even 24% are those are ever found. And then of course with what I found, what's going on behind just a simple human trafficking for sex and all. There's even some sinister discovery behind that. Were you able to discover that kind of sinister thing as well? I'm not sure if
Yes. The Guild of Service gave me an introduction to a charity, an NGO that is working in Delhi, because that's where I was, New Delhi. And they are working to rescue children. But by this time, because of Dr. Geary and her work and the people that she was networking with, it's now a huge group of people from different organizations, and they're linking up across the world. But these people were slightly hostile when I first went to see them. All except the woman who actually ran the organization, and she sat down and we chatted. And she said, it's the girl. It's, you know, we take the victim, the survivor, as our best source of knowledge because she's the one having had this experience. And I explained about the work I did and the work I've done in women's hostels with survivors of abuse. And I said, as a single parent from a, you know, there's many people would argue, one of the things we worked on, Francis, was that in the Western world, in the UK, for example, women have simply swapped their dependence on men for dependence on the state. You can now leave an abusive husband and take your children with you, but unless you're highly qualified, unless you have a really good income, you're going to have to claim benefits. So you still have to do as you're told. You're still dependent. So that interested her. She was fascinated in how that worked because it's something. And I didn't get to go out on one of the, because they were going out to rescue girls. They were in dangerous situations. And one of the men got angry and he said, we know who these people are. The police officers are corrupt, so they're never going to be prosecuted. But these girls are being passed on. They're going all over the world. And that's being made possible by rich and powerful men, not just in India. But, you know, these girls are going to the US and the UK and we know countries all over the world. So this is immense. This is the global pandemic. This is a real global pandemic.
But is it only about sex, or there's more to that than just sex? Like what?
No, it's blackmail. This is how the world is controlled. So you take a VIP or a celebrity, a politician. Let's look at Prince Andrew as a typical example.
Mm-hmm.
He was nicknamed Air Miles Andy. He was Britain's trade envoy, something like that. He went all over the world. We know how involved he was with Epstein. But this is what they do. They catch people. So, you know, you just made the big time through a hit record and you're invited to walk, because we know these people are managed. You know, when you look at Simon Cowell and people like him, so they're told how to dress and they're taken to all the right parties, and then somebody spikes the drink or they willingly take drugs. And before you know where you are, you don't really know what's going on at the other end of the room. But somebody does, and they have footage of it.
Yeah.
And there's a barrister who ended up in prison for opening his mouth called Michael Shrimpton, and he says a lot about you know, how Nazi Germany, the Germans always knew the value of paedophilia, and they were very clever at using it. So that's how the world's got, and people don't realize this. It's not just about sex or a preference for children. This is how governments are brought down. Because if you don't comply, you're not in a position of power for very long.
Well, I'm not sure if it's a convenient conversation for our listeners, but we're not going to be the first one to be mentioning this. It's becoming sort of mainstream, and there's several documentaries now coming mainstream as well in terms of the sort of the hidden agenda behind those missing and behind the human trafficking, which is the harvesting of the adrenochrome.
Yes. Yes.
And I could easily be speechless when it gets to that.
I'm thinking there's a lot being said at the moment about humanity isn't ready for this. They can't deal with it. There's a guy called Sean Atwood in the UK, who has who has a YouTube channel. And he's done extensive interviews regarding, very good ones, regarding Epstein and Prince Andrew and all of those people. Talking to people who worked in the police force and witnessed the corruption. That is bad enough to handle. The thought that this kind of thing has been going on in the BBC and in Westminster, that it might be linked to other paedophile networks across the world, people are struggling to deal with that. Adrenochrome, there's too much out there not to accept it, but I don't think people can.
You don't think people can?
I don't think people can deal with it. I think that's a step too far for the majority of people.
Well, that's really, really is sad. Anyway, let's go back to your discovery of yourself being what you do and becoming a tarot reader, energy spiritual healer, and clairvoyant and all that. Are there any sort of big instances wherein you had a client and you have some sort of a eureka moment or discoveries while you're reading something that has something to do with world events?
Sorry, Francis, can you repeat that question?
You've been doing this stuff for several years. Have there been any instances wherein, not necessarily where you're having a conversation or having a client with somebody, or perhaps just eureka moment while you're by yourself about the world events that we're going through now?
Yes, I find red wine and cannabis oil helps.
Right. Give me some of those, please.
That's when I have those profound moments of thought.
Where are we?
I speak to a lot of people, so I notice trends in the collective consciousness.
Yes.
So for a couple of weeks, it might be all about survivors of abuse. And then we'll have a spate of cultural differences within relationships. And then we keep getting bouts of narcissistic behavior on steroids, where people are getting it from their uncles, cousins, employers, neighbors, spouses, you name it. And I just think something is happening to the energy that is causing these things to be illuminated. They're being thrown up for us to look at, and those of us who are awake and aware might be able to do something about that. We might be able to deal with it and so grow. Those who don't understand, you can see them acting out. You can see these things being triggered within them.
Yeah.
And health problems there have been a lot of recently. So many people coming to me in distress because they're not getting the help they need from the medical profession, not from want of them trying, but because they're presenting with a set of symptoms that they don't really have a name for.
Yes.
And I think that's to do, you've frozen, Francis. I think that is to do with the control the pharmaceutical companies have over the medical profession worldwide. What else?
The thing about the, let me think how best to describe this. The thing about most medications, people just don't realize that it is connected actually to this sinister going on in terms of the adrenochrome and the missing people.
Yeah.
So there is a connection there, which is not so easy to discuss right now, but on an energetic level that is being used. So those medications has that kind of energy wherein, how best to describe that really, being used to sort of a control. The problem, I am a nurse, and the problem I see with my industry, suffice it to say, is that for most of us, we were trained to become robots. We were trained in such a way that we passed an exam if we can answer what is the medication for cough, what is the medication for this and that. So it's not really the kind of education that is critical thinking wherein you connect dots. It's the kind of education wherein, as long as you can answer questions in a robotic way, then you get certificates, then you go up the ladder. you become a master's, what have you. The reason I'm saying that is because, you know, I have discovered that the best way forward really is to look at the person in a holistic way. You can never heal uh, a recurrent, say, sneezing or fever or coughing or fatigue, you know, things like this, if you don't look at what's causing it in,
Yeah.
you know, in different levels.
Yeah. And I learned that through working in alcohol and substance rehab. I used to be accused of being too Freudian because I used to say, we're treating the symptoms, but we're
Exactly.
not looking at the root cause. Those
Exactly.
substances are an anesthetic, they're an escapism. If you don't get to what caused the pain in the first place, you're never going to take away the need for that anesthetic. You're applying a psychological band-aid, in other words.
Exactly. Yes.
You and I both know that the human body has the ability to heal itself if you give it the right ammunition.
Super powerful.
Yeah, we are works in progress. We don't always get it right. We're not always able to access that energy, but we're working on it. But I remember you commented on a post, I'm going back 2 or 3 years now, where one of the health authorities in England, in the south, was advertising for a spiritual healer. And you think, at last, we're actually trying to get somewhere. But of course, the powers that were are fighting so hard to keep all this under wraps now that they're actually trying to filter people like me out of search engines.
Yeah.
There was a young man, 17 years old. He rang me one day, and actually the NHS helpline had told him to get in touch with me because he felt he was experiencing a demonic entity. And I was so pleased that she told him to do that rather than telling him that he had a mental health problem.
Yes.
Because for him, this is very real. And I've had so many doctors and nurses sitting in front of me, and when I ask them if they're aware that they have healing abilities, they look at me as though I'm stupid and say, well, of course I do, I'm a nurse or I'm a doctor. Yeah, that doesn't mean you have healing abilities, that means you have an academic qualification, but you know that you can make a difference to somebody because your energy will just make them feel better.
That sounds
And
to
you
me
can
like
help them believe in their own ability to get well.
yeah, that sounds to me like a great definition for a healer. What you just said.
Do you think?
Oh yeah, because I mean, I used to be a nurse in a sense that I have the academic qualification,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, throughout the years, I sort of connecting things and discovering and finding out and observing that things are just not right the way they are.
Yeah.
And I sort of make a difference by a simple prayers when a patient comes in, adding it up to what I know, a simple giving them encouragement that, you know, this and that would help you, and you know, to believe in yourself and all that kind of thing. I thought those were those were the moments when I discovered that I'm not just a nurse, and I'm a healer and doing something.
You are a healer, a very powerful healer. Your energy is very powerful. Human beings need that. I'm a healer, but I don't always succeed in healing myself the way I want to. But if somebody gives us something that we have belief in that helps us make that leap, then we're there. And for many people, that's been medication. It's a placebo. They need their doctor to administer something, or their nurse to administer something that's going to make them feel better until, right, I can't quite articulate this. I know what I'm trying to say, but it's not coming out right. There is a gap between our confidence or our belief in our ability to heal ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and our physical condition, if you like. We need something to plug that gap until we've perfected the art of just correcting our own body when something goes wrong. And I wholeheartedly believe that that's possible. I think we're separated from it from that ability for all sorts of reasons, and by all, like medication that is actually destroying the body's immune system rather than helping it.
That's true.
But if you take a person to a healer that they absolutely believe in because of their religious beliefs or because of something they've heard, because of somebody else that person's helped, then chances are that that'll work when medication won't.
Right.
It's that belief or hope.
Yeah. That first statement you said about something there that we seem not to connect well just yet seems to have triggered me as well to think about, yes, that I'm actually in search of that missing piece as well. And
But very often you are that missing piece, Francis, when you're treating somebody else. You're helping them make that leap from the condition they think they're in to where they need to be. And because they believe in you and you make them feel better, they'll do it.
right. So, to change the topic, what's going on with the world now? What's going on? Why are we going through all this, this crazy stuff going on with lockdown and rioting in America and the supposedly the abdication of the Queen of England and all this coronavirus?
Oh, let's hope so.
The whole world gone crazy, if you know what I mean.
Did
What's
you
going on?
see, there's a video floating around, a very odd thing about Buckingham Palace, where apparently, the guys that used to wear the black hats and the red jackets, the household cavalry, they're gone.
For real?
You've frozen.
Yeah, I can hear you if even if I'm frozen or if you're frozen.
Yeah.
Is that for real?
Well, this guy took his camera to outside Buckingham Palace, and the royal insignia has been taken down off the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least one of them has. And he says the windows are boarded up. I couldn't see that, but you could definitely see that the household cavalry wasn't present. There was some sort of guard there, but not the usual ones.
Right, let me put you on the spot now. What's your energetic reading of that?
I'm sorry?
What is your energetic reading of it?
I think things aren't as they were. I think there's been too much heat. I'm not sure if we're ever going to see the arrests that they're talking about, but I do think people are being detained, and I think these trafficking rings are being dealt with.
Thanks,
I don't know how much they're going to make public because, again, I think it's hard for people to handle. I think they're quite worried about the state of people's mental health when all this comes out.
Yes.
It's not easy. You know what the awakening process was like, so do I.
Oh, well, it took me many years, more than 10 years, to come to a point wherein I can accept some bits that I were not able to accept before.
Well, yes, because you've been living a lie. You've been hard, big time, and you've swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. When I think of the debates and the arguments I used to have with people 10, 20 years ago compared to now, I think there are wars going on. I think some of them are off planet, and I think many of them are on planet. I think for anybody who watched Game of Thrones and knows about the Iron Bank, that's what we're talking about. You're talking about the same people controlling the money and wanting more and more money and power, and that's why we're still fighting wars. That's why we have a health crisis. This is all about the money.
Right.
It's all, and I think the Rothschilds, the European bloodlines are absolutely appalling, and they're tied up with the Vatican and the White House and the City of London. But I think every corner of the world has its own power structure.
Yeah.
I think the superpowers are killing each other off left, right, and centre. And we don't know the half of what's going on. We've frozen again.
So the world is as it is so much more, or as it appears. Well, in at least for you and I suppose on our personal level, we try to make sense of it, and we try to keep calm and have peace and harmony and tranquility and silence and all that, because we know how to deal with it. But
Mhm.
as it appears for other people, it's as if the whole world is going crazy, as if, it's the end of the world, and you see all this crazy rioting in America and all this going on all over the world. The way I see it is the birthing process of heaven on earth, wherein things are
Yes,
being cleansed.
yes.
You
And
agree
many
to
people
that?
are feeling that. And I think this is a lot of what's behind a lot of health issues. And it's a conversation I'm having daily at the minute. And if the lockdown taught us anything, talk about every cloud as a silver lining, people have
Yes.
had to reevaluate their lives, because it doesn't matter about your big flash car or your designer labeled clothes if all you can do is sit in your own living room and look at them.
Hmm.
Not, it doesn't make any sense anymore, does it? We've been in a consumer frenzy. Okay, this is why I hate Christmas. But I think as empaths, and so many people are empathic who don't realize that they have abilities, that this is the beginning of your psychic ability or clairvoyant ability. So many people who are empathic are feeling the fear and anger and pain of the outside world as all this negativity is forced upwards for release. And it's not make when you understand that, then you can sit down in the middle and say, hold on a second, this isn't mine. When you suddenly feel like bursting into tears for no apparent reason.
What would be your advice to people who would be listening to us and trying to make sense of what's
And
going
hang on,
on?
you've gone again.
What would be your advice to people who would be listening to us and who
Can't
would
hear
try to
you.
make a sense of what's going on in the world, or in their individual lives, or how it affect them, how they lost their livelihood, and what would be your advice to them?
Hmm. Now you're back. Sorry. Now
Yeah.
you're back. What was the question?
Oh, right. So what would be your advice to individual people, or as a humanity in general, with who are trying to make sense of what's going on around us at this point?
Um, I would say for the physical world, research whatever interests you. Look for the information yourself. There are many, many theories out there. Pick out what resonates with you. I would say, regardless of what you think is going on behind the scenes, or if you think anything is, get out into nature. 2 hours in nature is worth 3 nights' sleep.
Oh,
If
wow.
you can go where there are trees or water next to the ocean, if you can go and stand barefoot in your own garden, that will make a hell of a difference. We're out of sync with the earth. When you lose your connection to the earth, you've lost your connection to yourself. Use your creative ability. You know this better than most. When you use your creative talent, you're actually channeling your higher self. It's your soul's expression.
That gives
So
me
get all that stuff out there that would be going round and round inside your head. It's therapeutic, but then it's a gift you were always meant to share with the world anyway. So I don't care what it is, whether you can build walls, lay bricks, paint, write, start writing your own journal, even if nobody else ever sees it. It gets it out there, and you might discover that you've written something down, and that experience will be invaluable in helping other people.
do,
Make cakes, sew
do you know
things,
what
knit.
you mentioned about going out and being out there for 2 hours in nature, giving you a 3 days of sleep or something like that.
Yeah.
It's weird because in the past few days I've been going to a lake here in Nevada,
Mm-hmm.
wherein I dip my feet in the water. It's a salty water lake. And
Yeah.
after going home, I just feel so completely relaxed, even for a few minutes, probably 15 minutes of dipping my feet in the water.
Yes. And I live close to the ocean, and I haven't been there anywhere near enough, but that feeling of peace is
S-
always, it's more than peace, isn't it? It seems to cleanse you from the
Yes,
inside
yes.
out.
It's so difficult to put words on it. about
Yeah.
the feeling, but this, a feeling of calmness is I can't find the proper word to describe it, but it's all those that you can think of, all positive, adjectives,
Yeah.
and that's it.
You're
Is it
rested and refreshed and cleansed and healed.
invigorated?
And
Yes.
yeah, energized.
Rejuvenated. Is it because the Earth's frequency is changing and we really need to connect with it, or what's going on?
I think we always needed to connect to the earth.
We
I
always
think
need.
we've been taught to live in concrete buildings. We wear shoes all day long. We have, um, we've lost we would feel the earth's natural rhythm. If you stand on the grass barefoot and open your mind to that connection, it's like a current of energy or
Yes.
electricity running through your body.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if you then open your crown chakra, your higher self, so you've got that flow going both ways. It's
Yes.
an amazing experience. Really sets you up for the day. But
Yes.
so many people have forgotten how to do that. If you're working 9 till 5, or you're working late every night, or you get home in the winter, it's dark, you have other things that you have to do, you're exhausted anyway. So we don't. So Marion Green says in her book, winter is a time for going inwardly in the UK. It's a time for reflection. It's a time when you would naturally hibernate. You would stick to hearth and home. You would be with the family. Those are the times for the storytellers.
Right.
And it's a naturally quiet time for you to look back over the year's projects and decide what worked, what you want to keep, what you want to throw away, what you've learned, and what you want to do next year. Whereas spring and summer are for getting outdoors and enjoying the sunshine. How much does vitamin D that we get from the sunshine boost our immune system?
You are sharing to me really beautiful things, beautiful stuff, and which people can, I'm sure, benefit from. Do you have website or journals or Facebook pages or groups wherein you put your thoughts or understanding or reading, or are you planning to write
I
a book?
haven't. I've been lazy about that. I need a new website. But Rosa Montague on Facebook, you'll find me there. I have like a business page, which is simply my name, and I have a group called Jewel of the North that I
Mhm.
keep trying to do something different with, but it never works. You post quite regularly in there, and I'm grateful for that.
Mhm.
I think what I'm going to do with that is when I'm reading for my clients, I will often recommend videos or pieces of research or particular meditations, that kind of thing, to them that I think might help them. And they will say, could you please send me the link? And yeah, if I've had 8 clients that day, I forget. So I think what I'm going to do with Jewel of the North is start posting those links that I find, or as I say, when I notice a trend in the connective consciousness, when we're talking to survivors of abuse, Teal Swan, if anybody's ever come across her, has some wonderful videos that deal with that kind of thing. And I can't always fit it into a 45-minute reading. Also, Abraham Hicks. Have you come across her, Francis?
Yeah, Abraham Hicks. Yeah, I have come across their work as well on many groups and pages. A lot of people share their stuff, so
Yeah.
I'm happy with that.
She
You
does
plan?
one called The Great Awakening that I think is
Yes.
a good door opener for people looking into this kind of stuff. 2.5 minutes long, and it's one of the most inspirational pieces of work I've ever seen. But she talks about what we were talking about. They actually show you uh, a nurse standing with his hand on somebody's shoulder who's in a wheelchair.
Hmm.
And she actually uses those words because when they're with you, they can feel it. Yeah.
Right. Uh, can you mention that video again of Abraham Hicks? What's the title of it?
It's called The Great Awakening,
The Great Awakening. Okay.
and
I must
it's
have.
2.5 minutes long.
I think I've seen that many years back when I was still in the UK. Uh, Definitely Abraham Hicks and the other name that you mentioned, and many others have been part of the process of my awakening as well, and where sort of molded where I am now in terms of my understanding.
Hmm.
You do have good good information as well and good experience. And I wonder
Froze
why you're
again.
not thinking of writing a book about it.
I'm sorry, you froze for a minute, or I froze, so I didn't hear the question.
Yeah, I am very much inspired by what you do and what wisdom you have and things that you have discovered throughout your life. I'm just wondering why you're not writing a book about it.
I keep thinking about writing a book, but I haven't done it yet.
Right.
My son keeps telling me I need to follow my own advice.
All right, I'll maybe we'll make a video and then in sort of a book format, and then you just transcribe it somehow, and then that becomes a book for us. Would that
That
be
would be good.
all
Yeah.
right? Because at least I could trigger your you could trigger your mind, and then if it's there, then once it's transcribed in words, then you can just go through it, and then sort of uh, edit and add some more that might come to you at the time of you are when you're reading it and editing it.
I think maybe we can write one together and see where our paths have crossed. So give me a title and make a start, and I'll send you some passages, and then
Yeah,
you can add
well,
some.
let's do that. Let's do a video and send maybe 10 videos, and then we work from there. See how it goes. It's can be a year's project. We're not in a rush, so we'll probably do that once a month, and then
I think that would be amazing.
I think
Because
I,
you've had a fascinating life, Francis. So your experiences are mine.
I don't know why it comes to my head just now, but I thought I'd ask you that questions because I felt like you have that information that you really need to share to the world. So we're coming to 50 minutes now, and probably might be a good time to sort of close this conversation. Any sort of last parting words or any observation you'd like to tell the world, or anything else that might be an important question that I haven't asked you yet?
When are you coming back to the UK?
So, well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I miss England so much, and but I think there's something in my spiritual journey that's you know putting me where I am now at the moment.
And I think we all have to follow those. Wouldn't it be interesting if you and I could travel the world just meeting different healers?
I would love that. Maybe we'll start in the Philippines. Maybe I should
Well,
introduce.
this book, Francis, is going to be such an amazing bestseller that it will fund our travels around the world
Oh,
to work with different
let's make it happen. Let's dream that. Let's dream that definitely.
Well, let's put it out there then. See what happens.
So any parting words, perhaps any encouraging words you'd like to tell, the people who's maybe losing
Yes,
hope because of
please.
this COVID-19 being in lockdown for many months, people who's trying to end their life because, they feel like there's nothing hope they're coming for them, who lost their job, who's got family, and, there's a lot of people who's desperate out there.
Yes, and it's awful. And people who are in abusive relationships or unhappy relationships have really had it rammed home to them through this pandemic. I don't believe it was necessary for us for the state of the world. I think there's a hidden agenda. I don't think. Yes, there have been tragedies, and yes, people are catching something serious, and some are dying from it. But most of us are going to survive it, no matter what skullduggery those in authority get up to. We as human beings can work together, and that's how every humanitarian crisis is solved. It's through people working together. It's through people on the ground looking out for each other. So as long as we continue to do that, I think this whole situation has highlighted many things for many people. That's a good thing. It gives you the building blocks for the new life that you want to create. It's a bit like, I often tell people, they think of coming out of a relationship, they think of a breakup as a negative experience. Train your brain to flip the script. At that moment in time, you're the only one in the driving seat of your life. You have complete control. You have freedom to do what you want, to go where you want. You don't have to negotiate or compromise with anybody. If you're stuck behind closed doors at the moment, then use this opportunity to look at your life, and rather than thinking, I have to go back to that terrible, boring job, what kind of life would you like to create for yourself? Because it is possible. You know, we can't all take a huge leap overnight. We can start. So I'll say to people, excuse me, if you won the lottery tomorrow and you'd already shopped till you dropped and you'd been on the world cruises and you'd helped everybody you could help, what would your dream be? What would you do? Because you will hear, you know, the law of attraction.
Yes.
You hear so many people say, all I want in life is to be happy. And then they'll go out doing something they hate 5 days a week for the sake of paying the bills. It's not a vibrational match. So, you know, you hear people say things like, if I work at this horrible job for the next 25 years, I might be able to afford that cruise. I would argue, no, you need to go and get yourself a job on a cruise liner. Take yourself one step closer to where you want to be. So I think people can afford to have hope. I know it's been an awful situation. It's tested us to the limits, but we will get through this. Human beings are so powerful. Together, we're much more powerful than any authority in the world. But even as individuals, we can do so much to help ourselves. So I know it's easy for me to say, but as Esther Hicks would say, reach for the thought that feels better. Whenever you're feeling really down, recall your happiest memory, or think of somewhere you would like to go, or something that, or failing all else, a bottle of red wine.
Yes. Right.
If that's what it takes to get you back up there.
Right. This has been a very pleasant conversation, Rosa, and thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome. I love talking to you. Later.
I should have thanked you during the first questions, but I forgot that. So I say thank you so much for, you know, for the time that you're giving me, and for the time that you're giving the viewers and the audience.
And thank you for the opportunity and for your interest.
Right. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.
Yes.